Well, it's about 11:15 on October 8th. Dogs and I are out on the K&P Trail just south of Fish Creek Road. So we're just going to take a trip down the trail a ways, come back, and then maybe head north from where we parked. Well, it's a beautiful day out here in the land of the birch and the alder and the willow. Rough grouse drumming. And there's been spring peepers calling in the woods. Quite a few birds on the trail. Sunny and 18 degrees. Well, the ATVs and motorcycles are getting more common, and weekends can get really busy up here now, I've noticed. I understand they're out here enjoying the trail too, but it can get frustrating at times when you get big streams of them coming by and you have to keep getting off. And here we are coming up to the Marsh Bridge, about 2 kilometers south of Fish Creek Road. I'll probably end this part of the hike here today and then head back to where we parked. And then we might walk north of Fish Creek Road a little ways. This is the bridge I often walk to from the south, except from that direction I'm usually walking about 5.5 kilometers to get here. It's a nice place to stop and immerse yourself in the habitat of the swamp here. Very pretty, lots of wildlife. In the summer, this is just alive with birds out here. Here's a classic old sound from Canada's history. Sound of a rotary engine float plane. Looks like a beaver, maybe. Nice. Very nice sound. Seeing and hearing that float plane really brought back memories. In 1981, I worked for the federal government and we flew up to James and Hudson Bay and we sampled all the major rivers going into James and Hudson Bay, and we did it all by float plane. At that time we were using a Dehavilland Otter, which is a bigger version of that plane. So it can hold, I'm not sure how many people. There was at least 7 of us plus a lot of gear. So it was a real workhorse of the Canadian North. And it flew us into all the rivers, and we landed in the rivers with the pontoons. Sometimes we were anchored out in the river doing water sampling and benthic sampling for pollution. It was a great job. We were up there for 2 weeks, saw a lot of the Canadian landscape that probably no one has ever seen, or maybe a few people, native people for sure, but not a lot of others. I had a lot of fondness for that old aircraft when we were done with our trip. Inside it was really loud, and our pilot was almost deaf. I guess he had flown it for decades probably without too much hearing protection, so he was almost deaf from the sound. But typically you would have ear protection on inside because there's just a lot of vibrational noise and engine noise from the big rotary engine up front. I just remembered I did a painting of that old plane to celebrate the trip we had many years ago, and I'll maybe try and dig it out when I get home, and then I can include a picture of it in this video. Well, it took me a while to find it, but I found the old painting of the plane stashed down in our basement. Here it is. It's a large painting. It's about 2 by 3 feet or more in size. And I just wanted to capture the whole scene of our summer in one painting. So this shows our old otter docked on the side of one of the rivers, I think the Missinabi, and we're all out working. Left to right is Diane, Phil, Jim the pilot, one of my bosses Roy, and the other boss Rob, and then I'm on the front of the pontoon. Here's a close-up with my one boss Rob coming down from the plane, and there I am kneeling down on the front of the pontoon where I spent most of my time. This is another painting I had which I'd actually forgotten about at the start. These are my two bosses, Rob and Roy, conversing in the front of the Otter, trying to decide, I guess, where to go next or what to do next. I remember one day early on in the trip, we landed on the Missinabi River, and it was a little bit current filled, swirling around quite good. Anyhow, we landed and got the plane anchored in the middle of the river, and we were doing our water testing and water sampling for organochlorine contamination and benthic analysis. And before long, the pilot noticed that the plane was still drifting downriver with the current, even though we did have an anchor out. So they rushed to get a lot of the equipment in, but the pilot at one point just said, he yelled at me and said, "I'm just going to move the plane upriver a bit, and just hang on to the strut." And so I was out there. I'm sure this would give a lot of health and safety people the heebie-jeebies now if they ever heard about it, but I was out there on the pontoon hanging on to the wing strut, and the guy started motoring upriver just to get up to where we had initially been again. And we actually were skimming along pretty good, probably, I don't know, 20-30 kilometers an hour, and I'm out there hanging on to the wing strut with all this wind blowing in my face from the propeller. It was actually a pretty neat ride. I don't really think it was tremendously dangerous or anything. It was just kind of a unexpected thing that came along, and it was actually pretty neat. Certainly something I'll never forget. Probably not many people have ever done that. It's funny I didn't go on to be a wing walker or something later in life. That would have seemed to be the normal course of action from after something like that. Another interesting event I remember from that summer working up north, we had worked a full day in the extreme northwest section of the Hudson Bay Lowlands, and our pilot was bringing us into Winisk for the evening, and we were landing right on the main broad mouth of the river where it comes into the bay, I guess, if I remember right. There was a station there where we were going to stay for the night or two. I can't remember now. I think a couple nights. Anyhow, he had heard on his radio we were flying over the lowlands heading towards Winisk, still about an hour out. And he had heard on the radio that an OPP plane, another Otter, was heading to the same place. And he knew that the dock there only had enough space for, well, I guess the space was limited, so he wanted to make sure we got there faster. So I remember him putting the plane into a fairly angled descent when we were, I forget how many minutes out, but he was basically racing to get there so he could tie up ahead of the police plane. And I think we did succeed, if I remember right. We beat them there. So funny little things you encounter on a trip like that. Otherwise, it was an amazing trip, seeing lots of muskeg and boreal barrens that there's no way to even get to them other than going over them in an airplane or a helicopter. And you can fly for, even north of Missinabi, you can just fly for hours over these habitats that are virtually impenetrable almost. And such interesting designs from the air too. A lot of the bogs up there have geometrical design patterns or circular patterns all across the landscape. So you're just flying over those for hours. Interesting.